Again, so about a month ago, I did my short presentation on the role of cell phones in disease tracking. And now I'm back to do a longer presentation on it, and dive kind of deeper into the course concepts I talked about earlier, and also bring up some comments and questions that my peers had after they watched my presentation. Just a quick refresher into my topic. In the recent years, with the rise of the COVID-19 pandemic, location tracking as a way to help stop the spread of the virus has become increasingly more talked about, utilized, and has also been an extremely controversial topic among um, people. So in this class, we really focus on these course concepts that really can relate to anything that I've really noticed that after class, these core concepts I have in my presentation, I can relate to everything. Um, so through this presentation, I will talk about the course concepts, how they relate to disease tracking. And I will also argue that the course concepts we've learned this year from Professor Dent, and specifically the concepts of frames, race, and the public, do an adequate and fairly good job of explaining language use in cellular phone communication and why we act the way we act. So I'm sure you all remember this graphic from the last presentation. If you're new, I had this graphic and I kind of just put the words that popped out to me when I searched up different COVID tracking advertisements, you could call them, and kind of just different things I think about. So I am a public health major, if I didn't mention that earlier, which is why this topic's so interesting to me. So when I think about disease tracking, I think about, in location tracking, I think about location tracking, GPS, my cell phone that I have with me 24/7. I think about data collection and how long my data is being collected for, contact tracing, exposure. The word exposed can be kind of scary to see notification pop up. You've been exposed to this um, virus. That can be extremely terrifying for many people, especially people who aren't really educated on topics of public health and what to do. So I'm going to dive deeper into that. But I'd like to start off by kind of touching on the interviews I did for this. I interviewed 3 people. I interviewed my middle-aged father who works at a hospital. I interviewed my sister who is in her second year of law school, and interviewed my best friend who is a sophomore in college. So I asked them 2 questions. The first question is, how do you feel about the role of cell phones in communicating with others? My father said they are a must-have. It is putting a computer at everyone's fingertips. My sister's response was, cell phones are vital in communicating with others in this era, the ability to reach out to friends, family, healthcare, work, etc. All with the tip of your fingers makes it a critical lifeline for many people. And my best friend said, I think cell phones have increased efficiency and access when it comes to communication. Overall, I'd say that they've had a positive impact on communication. So all great responses. And then I asked them a second question, which was, after seeing the impact of COVID-19, would you be open to companies tracking your location data to help track the spread of cases and let people know when they've come into contact with infected people? And if you kind of notice the way I worded this question, there's a lot of, I don't want to say guilt tripping to the question, but just the question is set up to where if you say no, you might sound like a bad person to some. After seeing the impacts, would you be open to helping track the spread? So things like that. My father said, sure. My sister's response was a flat out no. And my best friend said, no. In a capitalistic society, companies will always use private information in order to profit unless there are proper regulations and consequences. And I do not believe huge companies would face proper consequences if they used our private information for their own gain. So all great responses that set me up perfectly for this presentation. So with the help of their responses, I will dive deeper into how language is used by calling on the 3 course concepts and a couple specific examples. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to focus mainly on frames and race, but I'd like you to overall think about the public when I talk about this. And when I say the public, I mean the audience who is being advertised for COVID location tracking. And it's us, individuals, regular people. When I think of COVID tracking, I honestly don't think about President Biden being tracked, or anyone like that. I think about us, everyday people who are around hundreds of, not just a lot of people every day. You take the metro, you're around hundreds of people every day. So I think about that. So let's talk about frames. So frames, a quick, brief definition is just essentially what is expected in a situation of two of the parties. So I would like to clarify for location tracking to help a pandemic would be individuals are tracked day to day, and when they are notified that they tested positive, they alert, let's say, an app that the CDC is backed by, that is backed by the CDC, and it helps individuals in their vicinity know to get tested too because they'll get a notification. So in this frame, these individuals are assuming that their location or their data is not being used for anything other than pandemic and disease control. And let's be honest, they are assuming this because that is what they are told, and they are not reading the terms and agreements before clicking I agree. We've all done this when we download apps. Everyone does it. Which leads me to my next point, which is also a great comment that someone left on my discussion post, is what compels us to give up our data so easily and trust the fine print. I think it's a couple of reasons. I think one, it's a relationship and connection we have with our phones. We think of it as a safe space, so we can block out anything. We have passcodes on it, Face ID, and that has just led us to believe that, we have passwords, usernames. That has just led us to believe that it's ours, it's protected, it's safe, but it's really not. A company called SafeGraph sold the phone location of 600 people who had visited Planned Parenthood clinics in June of this year. And it was also revealed that Facebook has been collecting data on individuals visiting websites of crisis pregnancy centers. And this was all going around after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So I think that is important to discuss. Next is race. So I'm not sure if a lot of people know about this, but the Tuskegee syphilis experiment was a study conducted between 1932 and the 1970s by the United States Public Health Services and the CDC, in which they did a study to observe the effects of a treatable disease, syphilis, on African Americans. However, they let them go untreated to see the effects. As a result, the men were not informed of the nature of this experiment, and more than 100 of them died. So I think studies like this is the reason people of color are so hesitant to not only get the vaccine in the first place, which is a whole other issue, but the reason I feel like people of color are so hesitant of social media in general and phones. And I found some data from 2015 from the Pew Research Center that said African Americans have long been less likely than whites to use the internet. And that continues to be this case today. Today, African Americans trail whites by 7 percentage points when it comes to overall internet use. I think that's important to talk about as well. I know my mother, personally, whenever we host family events at our house, one of my aunts loves Facebook. She loves posting pictures, and my mom, as soon as she walks in the door, my mom says, "You can take pictures, but no posting them to Facebook or anything." She does not like people to know her business. So I think that's a lot of people, not just race, but I think it is important to kind of notice the distinction. And I have a quote I'd like to read too. It says, "Every minute of every day, everywhere on the planet, dozens of companies, largely unregulated, little scrutinized, are logging the movements of tens of millions of people with mobile phones and storing the information in gigantic data files. In the cities that the data file covers, it tracks people from nearly every neighborhood and block, whether they live in mobile homes in Alexandria or luxury towers in Manhattan. The data exists as dots on a map, longitudes and latitudes that are trivial to associate with specific people when combined with publicly available information like home addresses." And then someone from the article says, "We tracked law enforcement officers as they took their kids to school. We watched high-powered lawyers and their guests as they traveled from private jets to vacation properties." So with that, I'd like to ask, why aren't you so trusting of your cellular device? Is it the passcodes? Is it the frame that you're expecting your data to not be used, to not be sold? What is it? Thank you.